Hello, beer tubers, and welcome to yet another Throwback Thursday with me, Peter, the master of hoppets. Today, throwing back with a beer that is a fond beer memory. This was one of the first beers that I ever got in a beer trade when I started doing beer trades back in the day. I remember, it's a big thing still, or I don't know how big it is. Beer trading, of course, is still going on. Over the years, most people, when they trade for beer, it's for hype releases. Back in the day, we somewhat did that, but we also did a lot of trades. I remember just like people, like whatever, local for local or something. Like we'd ship a box to the States and we'd get a box from the States back, and it'd be like they'd get some Scandinavian beers, Danish beers, we'd get some American beers. No one does that anymore, really, as far as I know. But it was fun times. And back then, we got a package from Jameson, who did YouTube beer reviews. He was part of Beer Geek Nation. I think he's done a few whiskey reviews now these days. His channel name used to be Tantrum777, and what he sent us as an extra was Deschutes The Abyss. So we're revisiting Deschutes The Abyss. This is going to be interesting. I got this one from my boss, Frederick, so thanks to Frederick for the beer. He picked this up in Sweden, of all places, because apparently they get Deschutes beers in Sweden. And they got The Abyss. So Deschutes is a much bigger brewery now than it was then. And back then, it was one of the more hyped breweries. This, Black Butte, The Dissident, a lot of these beers were really highly acclaimed. People traded for them. And I think one of the reasons why I discovered this brewery is because Joe D praised it to the heavens. Joe D was one of the OG beer tubers that I started watching back in the day, which I just loved. It was one of the guys I started watching just before I started my channel, actually, along with L. Harlock Lee from Canada. There's a few others, but those two were the main people I watched back then. Also, yeah, Bicycle, Mark from the Bike Beer Reviews, and yeah, there's a few others. There's a lot of guys who don't do any beer videos anymore. But Jakob, the Lord of Malt, and I got a hold of a big bomber of this. And it was only partially barrel-aged, which a lot of the Deschutes barrel-aged beers was back then, so they blended in fresh beer to the barrel-aged beer. And I've tried that myself, working as a brewer, and it ruins the barrel flavor of a beer. So if you're trying to just get the barrel flavor to die down, and you back blend in fresh beer, you lose a lot of barrel flavor. I'd only do that if I was not satisfied with the flavor from the barrels. So it's interesting that was the way to do it, but maybe, I don't know, the thought process behind it, I can't say what it was, because I've never been a brewer at Deschutes. But this is going to be fun to revisit. This is the 21 vintage of the beer. It's part of the Reserve series, and they do this every year, but since the early days of Deschutes and way back in 2010 and whatnot, they've done countless different iterations, 100% barrel-aged versions. There's been done, like, coconut, there's been port wine, there's been sherry barrel-aged versions and whatnot. This is the regular, so I'm guessing it's still bourbon. And back in the day, I said it was brewed with molasses and licorice. I don't know if it still is, because today they just say it tastes like molasses and licorice. So yeah, it'll be fun to check out. 11.8% this one here, the 21 vintage. Let's see how it is. As far as I remember, really old school American Imperial Stout, hoppy, bitter, roasty, and dry. It's not like modern, sweeter barrel-aged beers. And let's just see here in terms of, because they put the ingredients on their website, so you guys can, because we talked a lot about in the old review about spiciness, like almost like spicy rye. There's no rye in the recipe, according to this. So it's American True Rolled Pale Ale malt, roasted barley, black malt, chocolate malt, and wheat malt. So a lot of heavily roasted grains can also give spiciness. And the hop additions are Nugget, Cascade, and Delta. Interesting. So, and a lot of these old school American stouts, they were quite hoppy. But let's check it out. I'm really looking forward to revisiting this. It's going to be really fun. I like some of these old money American stouts, man, that we traded for back in the day. There's so many that'd be fun to do revisits to, and like just see if they're still as great. Also something like Dark Lord. I haven't had that in years, but I think that's fairly easy to get these days. But let's check this one out. So pitch black color. Looks like a nice Russian Imperial Stout or American Imperial Stout. Tan looking head. Nice carbonation on there. Let's check out the aroma on the 21 Deschutes The Abyss. Heavily roasted malt. Heavily, like really charry. Surprisingly hoppy. Almost citrusy. I can see where like I was picking up on some kind of spicy nuance back in the day. It smells so old school, man. It doesn't smell far out. So we do an old school American Imperial Stout where I work called King Ink. There's loads of similarities to that beer. Just that this smells more like the base beer. We also do a barrel aged version, which has a bit more bourbon character than this. This one has more fresh, bright oak, like dry oakiness. There's not like I couldn't, if you gave this to me blind, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint that was bourbon barrels. But they don't say bourbon barrels anywhere on here. It just says barrels. So it could just be oak barrels. But yeah, really roasty, really hoppy, charry, ashy, burnt malt, molasses, a little bit of dried dark fruit, surprisingly citric, almost grapefruity hoppiness. A really charry, ashy. There's a layer of sweetness to it. Just touches of sweetness. Like a sweet caramelly aroma. They're not using any crystal malts. It's all like heavy roasted grains, but you can smell that. There's loads of roast. What was it? There was no crystal, right? No. All kinds of roasted barley. Maybe it's just chocolate. Or maybe it's boiling. I don't know. But it smells like what I remember American Stout smelling like years ago. It smells very nice. Let's try it. Cheers. Thanks for the beer, Frederick. Old school. Screamingly old school. This is not for a modern palate. It's really good though. Yeah, I would not be able to pinpoint the barrel specifics. Wow, it's really bitter, roasty, and dry. Like crazily bitter. I wonder what the IBUs are on it. It's probably a combination of high IBUs and also, big roasted malts. Because there's like both black malt and roasted barley, all like these heavily roasted malts. Like it's a really edgy, roasty, dry, ashy Imperial Stout. That's also hoppy. Give this to anyone who does not know anything about Deschutes and just knows something about barrel aged beer and drank modern barrel aged beers. They'll be like, for a barrel aged beer, oh my god, it's not sweet enough. There's not enough barrel character. It's way too bitter. Like I think would be a lot of critique points. But if you look at the time when this was released, was how a lot of stouts were in America. Like and this was quite like if you compare it to something like North Coast Old Rasputin, for example, this is quite more like modern in terms of like the flavor profile compared to that beer, which is also from around that time. But it's still really old school. It's so roasty, like almost like soy sauce, umami, molassesy roastiness, and licorice. But the grapefruity hoppiness is definitely there too, which is very interesting. And it's just like it's a drying oaky finish. There's not necessarily, to me, any trace of spirit barrels. But it's a good beer. It is quite nice. But I prefer other types of barrel-aged stouts these days myself. I like that it has roast character. I would just like more of a barrel flavor profile. It's really got like edges. It's really raw tasting. Like there's so much roasty, ashy, burnt malt flavor paired with really, really bitter hop flavor. That's just like it dries out your palate. It's like it smacks you like bah, 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 bah. It's like it's borderline what I think some people might associate with like somewhat extreme beer just because it's so bitter and roasty. It's like it's in your face. But I do not enjoy it as much as I did back in the day. I can say that. Like it's a nice beer, but it's just I'm not like floored. I'm not wowed. But it's a really nice barrel-aged Imperial Stout, or just Imperial Stout, but old school. And I think if it was marketed more just like an Imperial Stout, or marketed as an old school American Imperial Stout, people would be more fired up about it. I don't know how this averages anymore. It's probably, hopefully, minimum around 4, but it's probably way below that because people nowadays do not like beers like this. It has to be diabetes sweet. I like sweeter beers, but I think sometimes it can be a bit much. But like this could actually have a little more sweetness just to round out some of the bitterness. But that was not the idea with this beer originally. It's just still how it is, and I can't specifically remember that's what it was like. But listening to my review, which I did beforehand with Jakob the Lord of Malts, it was such a nostalgic thing to sit and watch. it sounds exactly like what we're describing, or tastes exactly like what we're describing, like a bitter, dry, roasty, spicy Imperial Stout with somewhat nuances of barrel. But we could pinpoint a bourbon and also hints of coconut and vanilla. I do not taste that now. It's not really there. It's mainly just like woodiness. I'm still gonna go 90 on this. It's still a very damn fine old school American Imperial Stout, but you have to be into like really edgy, roasty, hoppy, old school American Imperial Stouts. I'd say this is a touch more extreme maybe than King and our Imperial Stout, but it's in that vein because it's also really hoppy. But yeah, I mean, you have to be in the mood for these kind of beers. I like it, and I think a lot of old money people will love it. But if you're new into the craft beer scene, I'm not sure how much you'd like it. It depends on your tolerance of bitterness and roasted maltiness. But yeah, fun to revisit. Really nostalgic to try this. This used to and it's so crazy. This used to be hype. This used to be beer you traded for. I don't think anyone would trade for this now these days. If you just think of the landscape of beer right now. So yeah, fun. So if you guys had a chance to try Deschutes the Abyss. More specifically, the 21 vintage, or any vintage for that matter, or if you had a variation, let me know how they are, and if they're anything crazy and fun, let me know. But yeah, really fun to revisit this one. Thanks a ton to Frederick for the beer, and as always, remember to comment, subscribe, check out the Facebook fan page and Twitter and Instagram. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and ring the bell for future notifications about videos. And I'm gonna say cheers in another Throwback Thursday in the books, or for another Throwback Thursday in the books, and say cheers, and see you guys in another beer review. Or Throwback Thursday, even.